Hello guys, welcome back to our anime moments. Today is explanation of upcoming episode Throne of Seal based on novel. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. So let's start. In truth, this state was actually due to the fact he had been suppressing his feelings for so long. After Kia's loss of memories, Long Hao-chen became filled with an anxiety that one might well imagine. The one who best understood his pain was only himself. To take good care of Kia, he could only conceal this pain in his heart, keeping his tears inside him. Forcing a smile on his face to comfort Kia, he kept trying to help her recover her memories. As days passed, Kia's state stabilized, but the pain filling Long Hao-chen was only growing deeper day by day. That was because he hoped to reunite with the Kia he shared deep love with. If he had been more resolute at that time, forcefully stopping Qian-Qing from starting this battle, perhaps nothing of that would have happened. But how could others know about the self-blaming filling his heart at that time? At this moment, although the one he was about to face was not the one responsible for Kia's loss of memories, it was still another powerful demon foe. The feeling suppressed in his heart immediately caused him to enter a berserk state. As the days had gone by, his comprehension regarding sword intent had gradually deepened, his emotions and his sword intent merging into one, giving rise to this state. Without a doubt, Long Hao-chen in this state was undoubtedly fearful, or rather terrifying. But similarly, if he were to not get a valid target to vent out in this state, the blow inflicted to his mind would be enormous. This was unrelated to strength, stemming directly from his psyche. Quietly approaching the battlefield, Long Hao-chen concealed himself in the poisonous fog. His self-control was in the end extremely strong, and after the short time of recovery he managed to barely control his own surges of emotions. Slowly opening his eyes, he peeked the inside of the battlefield from its border. The first thing that caught his eye was that massive demon god pillar. Right, that was definitely a demon god pillar. In the past, Long Hao-chen had already faced the god pillar belonging to the supreme ruler of the 72 demons. In particular, the demon god emperors gave him a really massive shock, so he recognized that thing at the first look. However, his eyes never looked at Andromalius, for fear that his presence would be noticed because of that. Silently calming himself down, Long Hao-chen quietly observed the changes on the battlefield. Right now, the offense of the devil snakes was growing fiercer and fiercer, and the forest boars were losing the edge little by little. The massive forest boars were certainly extremely tough in defense, possessing astonishing strength, but just like even a hero is no match against too many enemies, a tiger is no match for a flock of wolves. The forest boars that didn't reach 20 in quantity were beaten with large masses of devil snakes, bruised, rapidly holding themselves inside the swamps, and only showing the half of their bodies to the devil snake demons. The devil snakes didn't seem affected by the swamp ground in the slightest, advancing and retreating in sequence. Going on the offense in successive surges, their darkness spiritual energy was urged to the greatest extent. Frequently, 3 to 5 devil snakes would launch a joint attack with the effect of leaving large scar on the F-breast boa. The forest boa king started to let out a low growl, similarly urging his own clansmen. Meanwhile, its massive body started to twist, visibly about to suddenly attack at any time. It looked that the situation of the forest boars wasn't very great. If this went on, the forest boa king was perhaps going to intervene. But obviously, the devil snake demon god glaring at him like a tiger wasn't going to let him do as he pleases, so an intervention would lead to a direct confrontation between these two. Though, with the awe of the demon god pillar, this battle seemed to hold no suspense if things kept going on this way. Long Hao-chen couldn't help but let out a sigh of relief. Indeed, arriving early was no way as good as arriving at the perfect time. And to him, this timing was just more than favorable. Nonetheless, the question remained how they could help the forest boars, the best result remaining to be a mutual destruction. And also, the devil snake demon god couldn't be allowed to run away. Long Hao-chen didn't act with overhaste. Right at this time, watching calmly was the best choice. Moreover, his plans were still not completely decided. Meanwhile, while surveying the position of the forest boa king, he faintly discerned a dark cave that seemed to be behind the forest boa king. This cave was quite unusual, surrounded by thick vines. It was as if the whole cave was protected behind the vines spreading from the ground. It was when the forest boa king moved that Long Hao-chen managed to discern a bit of it. With a mournful snarl, the forest boa king exploded. This king of the swamps of gloom visibly seemed unable to bear this situation. With the enemy attacking his own lair, and slaughtering his people, his anger was understandable. Even if the fear from the demon god pillar restraining him was even higher, seeing the counterpart threat his own existence, he had no choice but to fight. This snarl of the forest boa king had an instantaneous effect. The forest boars all came to a standstill, and immediately, some dark green ball of light Longhouchen was familiar with bombarded directly the group of devil snakes. This movement of the forest boars was efficiently coordinated and executed, to the extent that even Andromalius wasn't able to make it a time to instruct his subordinate against it. With an intense explosion, over 50 devil snakes standing in the front were instantly caught in the explosion, changing into fragments in the air, and soiling the swamps with their blood. The next instant the 10 forest boars spat out their internal pills. They suddenly leapt, rushing in the midst of the enemy ranks. With their unyielding power, they forcefully compelled the devil snakes back, then swallowed back their respective internal pills, before disappearing into the swamps. Having suddenly being subject to such a violent attack, the devil snake demon god Andromalius felt unable to hold back any longer. These were the elite among his subordinates. The lives of each one of them mattered. These devil snakes at the 5th and the 6th step were not that easy to foster, so how could he stay and be indifferent in front of this scene? A sharp cry came out from Andromalius' mouth, and the same motion was performed by the 4 Medusas standing at his side, that all opened their eyes. The 4 snake women opened their eyes, causing the distant Longhouchen to shut his eyes unconsciously. After he felt the threat disappear, and opened his eyes once again, he immediately took a long breath. From the attack that was just launched, among the forest boars on the surface of the swamps, 3 didn't make it back to the swamps in time. Their upper bodies were standing still, and even the swamp surrounding them stopped moving. Petrification. This is an innate ability of Medusas, and one of the most terrifying ones used by devil snakes. Even the devil snake demon god Andromalius doesn't have control over it, as this is a speciality of Medusas. The devil snakes naturally wouldn't let go of such good opportunity, and in a flash, the 3 petrified forest boars were reduced into fragments under their attacks, losing life a moment later. The forest boa king was also subject to attacks. Of the 3 Medusas, 2 had aimed for the forest boars, while the tallest one went after the forest boa king, with the simple goal of preventing him from interfering. In the midst of a roar, the forest boa king fixed his eyes on Andromalius, his fury visible in his eyes. In some sense, they were all of the snake race, yet right now they were akin to mortal enemies. The figure of Andromalius was already massive, but it still paled in comparison with the forest boa king. As the 2 great powerhouses were on the verge of fighting to death, Longhouchen put even more care in concealing his presence. To him, the battle that was about to take place was extremely valuable material. He had always wanted to know the extent of the power a demon god could use when he used his demon god pillar to its fullest extent. And the answer for this question was about to come in this stage. The devil snake god Andromalius thrust his snake spear forward, yelling continuously. The surrounding devil snakes also howled, and only the 4 Medusas by his side remained motionless, staying beside the demon god pillar, calmly facing the direction of the forest boa king. These 4 Medusas were like 4 enormous magic cannons. Who knew when they would fire again? Andromalius lifted the snake spears in both his hands high, simultaneously, and his muffled chants gradually became more reverberating, and started to sound sharp to the ears. Behind him was the 72nd demon god pillar, which started letting out a mild purple glow. For some reason, when sensing this mild purple light, Longhouchen suddenly felt some familiarity. This familiar feeling wasn't coming from a demon, but seemed to, thinking about this point, Longhouchen suddenly had a change on the expression in his eyes. However, it very quickly returned to normal. Immediately, the large snake sculpture on top of that massive demon god pillar seemed to come to life. A dark shadow appeared from nowhere, quietly adhering to the body of the devil snake demon god's body. Longhouchen's pupils abruptly dilated, because to his shock he saw that after assimilating that shadow, the devil snake demon god Andromalius unexpectedly enlarged at an astonishing speed. The aura on his body also gained in size and power. That massive aura seemed to originate from his blood vessels, but it seemed to be an extraordinary energy that doesn't belong to this world. His strength remained at the peak of the 8th step, but the intensity of his aura even surpassed the powerhouse of the 9th step. From afar, the devil snake demon god Andromalius seemed to have fused completely with his demon god pillar, and even the snake spears in his hands kept on enlarging. The forest boa king kept bellowing continuously, and the 3 golden glows on his back illuminated even more. Circles of jade-colored radiance spread out from his body, dispersing the darkness essence in the air at an astonishing speed. What replaced it was 2 kinds of particular elemental fluctuations reeking of life and death. The poison in the swamps became even more dense in the air, an acid rain of poison started to fall. As that rain of poison fell on Andromalius, one could distinctly hear some tingling sound, accompanied by a faint smoke. From this can one well imagine the great danger associated with the attack. It was indeed far from something easy to deal with. The demon god pillar that accorded him a boost was something all demon god possess, as well as an ability exclusive to the 72 demon gods, called demon god transformation. A demon god in a demon god transformed state will gain a massive boost in aura and strength. His or her external spiritual energy will rise to an extremely terrifying level. For instance, the current devil snake demon god Andromalius was still at the peak of the 8th step in internal spiritual energy, but his external spiritual energy was already at the 9th step. With every different demon god pillar come different fields and degrees of amplifications. From this, one can imagine the degree of terror if the demon god emperor were to complete the demon god transformation from his devil dragon pillar. As the two immense snake spears aimed straight for the forest boa king, an intense elemental explosion occurred in mid-air. In fact, under the control of the forest boa king of the 9th step, the surrounding elemental fluctuations were dispersed, but he was unable to disperse the elemental essence coming out from the demon god pillar. Andromalius harmonized himself with his demon god pillar, so would he let himself be affected? Jade and black clashed in the air, producing an explosion of incomparable intensity, repelling all the surrounding swamps. Massive shock waves dispersed, blowing the acid rain away. Some devil snakes of insufficient spiritual energy or that didn't dodge in time were also caught in it, and shouts could be heard for a moment. This was visibly done intentionally by the forest boa king. As a ruler of the swamps of gloom, he had numerous means of self-protection. When this mighty being unleashes his power, he won't show weakness even against a demon god. The fight between Andromalius and the forest boa king looked very simple and direct, and the forest boa king's massive body was brazenly exposed in front of all the devil snakes. His build reached a terrifying length of over 60 meters, and the thickest part of his body reached 5 meters in diameter. This was such a terribly massive monster. Even after getting a boost from the demon god pillar, Andromalius still paled in comparison to him. The two powerhouses both had such massive builds, and both also primarily excelled in using external spiritual energy. A red and jade-colored spiritual energy frantically devoured each other. At every clash, the two powerhouses let out a sound close to a groan. Long Houchen was silently observing from afar, filled with some shock. He was already certain that even if his comrades and himself were to cooperate and focus on one of those two only, their odds of victory would hardly exceed 33%. This was the strength of a powerhouse of the 9th step. It was even enough to cause changes to the surrounding terrain. If not for Andromalius' voluntary effort to redirect most of the shock waves in the air, it was highly possibly that none of the devil snakes remaining here would survive those. So he had to get involved to prevent that. Immense radiance kept rising to the sky, and the very dense poisonous fog was unexpectedly pushed away by the battle. Faintly, one could see traces of sunshine. Strong! Long Houchen was secretly exclaiming in admiration, naturally directing this praise at the forest boa king. Even though the forest boa king is a magical beast, one cannot underestimate him. Very clearly, from the start of the battle, he was the one who incited Andromalius to direct the reverberations of spiritual energy in the air. And Andromalius had no choice but to do this, because this was the only way for him to prevent his clansmen from receiving damage from their attacks. Long Houchen very rapidly groped the back of a devil snake, and thrusting the sword in his hand, he produced a flash of light while instantly piercing the skull of that devil snake. Long Houchen's sword intent was something even Arbao wouldn't dare confront, so there was nothing to say about these devil snakes. The fighting intent he had been restraining erupted, as Long Houchen was completely driven by his senses. Every time he made a move, his location changed instantly, using the simplest pattern of attacks with Demon Wiping Flash. Combined with sword intent, Demon Wiping Flash made a perfect match, without a doubt killing a devil snake at every strike. More terrifyingly, the devil snakes all died being penetrated in the head by Long Houchen's swords, hardly even getting the chance to scream. Occasionally, little sounds would be heard, but interrupted as their throat would get pierced, with their owner cowering in fear. And Long Houchen was not the only one interfering the fleeing devil snakes. Don't forget about the forest boars that submerged themselves in the swamps. The forest boars bitterly hated these intruders. At the time the devil snake king gave the devil snakes the order to retreat, the forest boa king also used his own methods to give his clansmen the order to chase. At this moment, as Andromalius was merged as one with his demon god pillar, his perception in demon god transformed state was a lot higher than usual as well. The screams of his clansmen naturally reached his ears, but now that he was caught in fierce struggle against the forest boa king, and that their battle was already at its peak, he was unable to do anything about it. All he could do was to fiercely attack the forest boa king. One had no choice but to admit that the demon god transformed Andromalius' situation was quite terrible. In this state, his body was not the slightest bit inferior to the forest boa king, and in his hands, there were powerful weapons. The scars inflicted on the forest boa king's body kept increasing, and although Andromalius didn't have it easy either, his recovery speed still vastly surpassed his enemies. And moreover, he still had helpers beside him. For pairs of white eyes opened without a sound behind the distant demon god pillar, and 8 white beams hit the body of the forest boa king in a flash. Suddenly, the whole body of the forest boa king went rigid, making a frantic turn. With this, another layer of his snake skin came off, as he resisted the effects of petrification. This undoubtedly made Andromalius' attacks lose a lot of their ferocity. How could Andromalius let go of such a good chance? His eyes were soaked in blood, and the spears in his hands held high, despite that his massive and supple body was close to forming an angle of 90 degrees. A strong darkness essence of black color attached itself to the 2 spears, before they ferociously struck the forest boa king's body. Blood spattered, some dark green blood flew in all directions. Shouting in rage, the forest boa king shot out at full force, creating some distance with Andromalius with difficulty, but one could clearly see some black light curling up on his body. On that massive wound were traces of severe corrosion. The forest boa king was utterly furious, and flames were almost gushing out from his jade-colored eyes. A terrible green projectile of 1 meter diameter shot out, directly smashing against Andromalius. As this person was doing his utmost, one thought surged to Andromalius' mind, as his body made an horizontal turn. That was the internal pill of a powerhouse of the 9th step. Although he wanted to take it, if this item under control of the forest boa king were to smash his body, even if it was more durable, it could only end up unfavorably for him. The same time he did this turn, a gaudy dark golden color started to lit up Andromalius' body. As he lifted up the spear in his hand, a mirage appeared beside him with a strident hiss. It was about the same as his body in height, heading straight for that internal pill. But a strange scene followed. The originally enraged forest boa king suddenly revealed a shrewd look. His overbearing internal pill actually made a turn in the air, and didn't aim at Andromalius, but straight at that demon god pillar. In terms of strength, the forest boa king should originally have held an absolute advantage. After all, the gap between the 9th step and the peak of the 8th step corresponds to an incredible gap, and the forest boa king was in complete control of the elemental essence in the area. However, the demon god pillar just showed too greater utility. Not only giving the snake devil god a powerful backup in elemental essence, but also raising his external spiritual energy over 100,000 units. This caused the gap between the 2 sides to decrease. The forest boa king was already successful in his past series of plans, and this caused his self-confidence to grow, to the extent of committing a fatal mistake with his internal pill that got inflicted a backlash due to the demon god pillar, leading to such an absolute disadvantage. However, the bombarding of the internal pill against the demon god pillar just before didn't prove out useless. At least, the 4 Medusas hidden behind it fell into the swamps due to the powerful shockwaves, letting out blood from their mouth and nose. Rapidly climbing up, they still avoided getting sunk into the swamps though. Although Medusas had quite overwhelming abilities, they were in the end still devil snakes of the 6th step only. The offensive power of the internal pill was completely sustained by the demon god pillar, but the terrible surge of spiritual energy that came along spread to a certain range, still injuring these 4 Medusas. A faint green flash came, before coming to a sudden stagnation. This sudden movement and stop appeared very weird, and the position of its stagnation was the center of the area occupied by the 4 Medusas. Immediately, that green color turned into a tornado, bursting out in countless green circles. With a piercing hissing sound, those 4 Medusas immediately screamed loudly. At this time they didn't even dare open their eyes, because the violent fluctuations of spiritual energy caused them to enter a dizzy state. What if the petrifying rays were to fall on their comrades? In fact, even the Medusas themselves weren't immune to their petrifying rays. Nonetheless, these Medusas were still powerhouses of the 6th step. The snake hair on their head bubbled up frantically, in an attempt to resist against the green attacks. However, all their snake hair were reduced to fragments upon contact with the green light, which was the reason for their screams. That was a part of their own bodies. The 4 Medusas were finally unable to bear any longer, and opened their eyes. Their snake hair were twisted in light, and that sharp aura already reached out from them. Be it demons or humans, in those circumstances anyone would choose to save themselves. And they were after all able to sense the location of the enemy, but at the time they opened their eyes, the ones who appeared in their sight were their own kin. As for the splendid green figure from whom those dazzling skills originated, it was several meters away from their sight, causing him to be out of their field of view. The 4 of them were instantly petrified, as the Medusas ended up hitting each other. After getting petrified, their bodies sunk into the swamps. That green light didn't even give them the chance to be buried. Immediately kicking the 4 petrified Medusas, he sent them flying towards a distant vine. With a green glint, they disappeared from behind the demon god pillar. Arg! Andromalius shouted in fury. Among the devil snakes, the most precious of his kin were the Medusas. Due to their petrifying abilities, reproducing them was extremely difficult. And with their level of power, they formed the left and right arms of the devil snake god. The mature Medusas among their whole race only had a count of 6, among whom the last 2 were keeping watch over the territory, while the other 4 were brought along by Andromalius. But he never expected that these 4 Medusas would actually die in such murky circumstances. In his fury, it was naturally against the forest boa king towards whom all his rage was directed. This enmity could only be washed away with the blood of the enemy. This time, the forest boa king ended up unjustly blamed, and even he was unable to make head or tail of this situation. That was because he clearly sensed that the green glow was of wind element, thus not from his men. However, since someone else was giving him a helping hand, this made one more reason he couldn't let himself be done by Andromalius. On top of that, with the disappearance from the threat of the 4 Medusas, the pressure on him was reduced by a big margin. This time of moderation permitted him to recover a lot of his spiritual energy, and now was the time for it to erupt, in the battle to death against Andromalius. The 4 petrified Medusas were already transferred into Longhouchen's eternal melody. If he didn't take a good opportunity such as the previous one, Longhouchen wouldn't be true to himself. The Medusa sisters certainly have good perception, which could be seen from their ability to sense their surroundings even with the eyes closed. If they didn't have a good enough perception, how would they be able to aim for the enemies without their eyesight? For this reason, Longhouchen kept his aim locked at the Medusas but didn't take care of this by himself. In his original plans, he wanted to have Wang Yuanyuan dispose of them, as the instant teleportation from the spiritual stove of Spatial Gate was undoubtedly the most suited choice to kill the Medusas. However, Longhouchen was still worried by the fact that Wang Yuanyuan was only at the 6th step of cultivation. Although she also had grasp over antique martial techniques, confronting the 4 Medusas by herself remained risky. As Longhouchen was considering on who should accompany Wang Yuanyuan, the Forest Boa King created a great chance for him. The 10th Holy Guard then reappeared in the battlefield, performing a dance of wind without holding anything back. The 4 Medusas then ended getting caught in their own trap, finally getting disposed with their own petrification rays. Having managed to get rid of the 4 Medusas smoothly, Longhouchen undoubtedly breathed out with great relief. They weren't like the Forest Boa King, who could resolve the problem of the petrifying rays with his layers of skin. While settling some later troubles, this also relieved the Forest Boa King of a great inconvenience. The clash between these 2 great powerhouses obviously reached even greater tempo, which relieved Longhouchen of even more worries. Once again stepping back inside the dense fog, he murmured a sentence to the 10th Holy Guard before going back to exterminate the Devil Snake's elite. But to avoid being found out by Andromalius, Longhouchen still showed a lot of self-control, exercising restraint on his light attribute to the greatest extent and relying solely on sword intent to kill the enemies. His powerful senses enabled him to see in the fog like it was nothing, and what followed was the successive cries of the devil snakes. At the same time, he intentionally avoided the forest boars, and the 2 sides that were originally no allies ended up matching well in the attack. Of course, Longhouchen wouldn't let the devil snake's elites disposed in his hands get swallowed in the swamps. These were devil snakes at least at the 5th step, and their corpse and internal pills both fetched for a great price. As Drug Bro will definitely appreciate these. Dark green blood was continuously gushing out from the confrontation between these 2 great powerhouses. The Forest Boa King was visibly weakened, and with the backup from the demon god pillar, Andromalius' darkness spiritual energy seemed inexhaustible. Above his snake spears, 10-meter-long dark red radiances were sprayed out. He didn't even use skills to attack from a distance, repeatedly leaping up and attacking. All he used were the most direct and barbaric ways to wound the massive Forest Boa King. Finally, the Forest Boa King's body became unable to bear, and suddenly letting out a howl of rage, he once again spouted a dark green glow. Andromalius remained very tense up till now, only waiting for this. With a flash of reddish-black light, his body disappeared baselessly, appearing at the rear of his demon god pillar. There was no doubt that he was waiting for this. At the time the internal pill of the Forest Boa King once again smashed the demon god pillar, his victory would become certain. However, just like Andromalius kept scheming against the Forest Boa King, the Forest Boa King similarly schemed against him. That dark green light only advanced for 1 meter before getting absorbed back without shooting for real. Then, the massive forest boa king directly sunk into the swamps. The swamps. This was the true territory of the forest boa king. The reason why forest boa king hadn't done this before wasn't because he didn't want to, but because he didn't dare. With how massive his body was, even if his strength was even greater, entering the swamps needed time, and that short span of time was sufficient for Andromalius to inflict serious injuries to him. So this time, Andromalius turned out to be the one who was fooled. Relying on the ability of instant return to teleport beside his demon god pillar to avoid that attack, he gave the forest boa king sufficient time to escape into the swamps. And furthermore, the teleportation ability of the demon god pillar isn't usable as one wishes. After every use, one would need to wait a long time before using it again. This teleportation in itself isn't an ability belonging to Andromalius, thus could only be used within a certain range. Otherwise, if the demon gods were able to teleport out of any ambush, humanity would have been screwed long ago. This time, Andromalius' nose turned at a crooked angle, and his response still ended up too late. The forest boa king was already back in the swamps, and all he could do was to vent out on these oozy swamps, attacking it at full strength with the hope to inflict some wounds to the forest boa king indirectly. In the ooze, the forest boa king was like a fish in the water, and the traces of his presence disappeared instantly. These two powerhouses were fighting and scheming against each other, and with the stratagems both sides relied on, it could be said that none of them managed to entirely suppress the other. Andromalius was also extremely shrewd. Seeing his opponent disappear, his rough tail was immediately flung in front of the demon god pillar, pushing himself to climb on top of it, to lead the area of swamps. Only by relying on the demon god pillar, his strength was displayed at its greatest heights while the forest boa king was greatly weakened. With the enemy having gone out of sight, he opted for the most reliable choice, truly proving himself to be one of the 72 demon gods. Now that the forest boa king's body disappeared in the swamps, the cave he was obstructing before appeared in his view. From the human point of view, this cave could be considered very large, but to the forest boa king or the demon god transformed Andromalius, it wasn't very wide. Its diameter was roughly 30 meters, the whole cave was surrounded with vines, spreading out from the swamps. Vaguely, one could see a faint light shining inside the cave. Without a doubt, life is more precious than any treasures, and after getting threatened fatally, the forest boa king had to renounce on the defense of this cave. A cold smile appeared on the face of Andromalius, so you want to hide? Okay, but I don't believe you'd abandon that cave. The treasure inside this cave was originally the first objective of Andromalius. No matter whether he could kill the forest boa king or search for this treasure, the final result was good. At least this won't have turned into a wasted trip. After locking his target, Andromalius moved without hurry. Attaching himself to his demon god pillar, he kept breathing. That pillar started to exude some brilliant black rays that was absorbed into his abdomen. This kept increasing his imposing stature, and recovered the spiritual energy he had consumed before at an astonishing speed. No matter what one may say, the demon god standing near this demon god pillar was still the last ranked of all, but with its support, he still managed, against the expectations, to suppress a forest boa king of the 10th step. A massive body started curling up, and on its back, a pair of large black wings unfolded, emitting some dark red color. Some sort of dark red color throbbing veins could clearly be seen on him, as Andromalius' breathing kept going on. Seeing that he was on the verge of being back to his peak state, Andromalius finally set on move. His curling body suddenly ejected, shooting like a bolt of dark red lightning inside the cave. From his demon god pillar to the cave, the distance was close to 200 or 300 meters, but given his strength and speed, and with the assistance from the wings on his back, he reached it almost instantaneously. Attacking to bait the enemy out? This was his plot. The forest boa king had no choice but give in to this overt plot, unless he accepted to let go of the treasure inside of this cave. But very clearly, the forest boa king was unwilling to let go of it. The instant right before Andromalius reached the cave, an intense green light erupted from the swamps, mixing with the ooze to form a greenish-black color. This was the accumulated spiritual energy that unexpectedly showed a solidified shape. For the sake of the thing in that cave, the forest boa king was doing his utmost, because the thing inside of that cave was just too important in his eyes. Since Andromalius dared act, he clearly made his preparations long ago. That greenish-black projectile was precisely the internal pill of the forest boa king, shot out with all his force. At the time it was spouted, the forest boa king's head also charged out from the swamps. A strange scene followed. Surprisingly, Andromalius ignored that pill, and waved up his two spears, thrusting at the forest boa king. No matter how cunning this forest boa king was, he couldn't have expected Andromalius to dare meet him so recklessly. His original plan was to frighten Andromalius and push him to escape. The internal pill of a magical beast of 10th step, is it something so easy to bear? The unshakable demon god pillar aside, if this landed onto Andromalius, it would be fatal to him. However, all of this happened too fast, and even if the forest boa king wanted to change his attack, it was already impossible at this point. Demon God Incarnation was a powerful ability brought by a demon god pillar. And this scene was clearly seen by Long Houchen, who was back to the edge of their battlefield. He couldn't help but let out a breath at the scene. If he didn't see it personally, he wouldn't have been able to imagine that Andromalius actually had such a powerful ability in reserve. Using himself as bait, and launching the fatal blow at a time the enemy was certain to get baited. Andromalius' plan went as expected, and the forest boa king finally ended up dead. However, Andromalius wasn't very well either. Dark red blood kept flowing out from his cavities, and his originally sinister looks became all the more intimidating. All of this just happened too fast, and no one could have anticipated the conclusion to turn out this way. Nonetheless, the battle wasn't yet over, and the forest boa king with fatal wounds at the head turned back madly, immediately setting off at the direction of the wide expanse of swamps. Terrifying fluctuations of spiritual energy immediately burst out at astonishing speed, just like 100 magical cannons shooting at once. Long Houchen didn't dare stay there, and rapidly brought the 10th Holy Guard away from there. The last struggle from a magical beast of the 10th step was terrifying. Andromalius flapped his wings, going up in the air. He unexpectedly tried to conceal his own presence, covered in a black cover, and letting none of his blood drop. Actually, using Demon God Incarnation came with a severe overdraft to Andromalius. In case this ability is used, Demon God Transformation would be sealed for a short time, and he would be injured to the core. It wasn't as simple as Long Houchen saw it, just like a spiritual stove, with a greater power came a more severe backlash. If he had the choice, Andromalius would rather not have used this trump card, but he had no other choice. If he went for the safe way, that would scare away the severely wounded forest boa king, who'd let go of the treasure inside. But he was unwilling to let go of the great tonic the forest boa king could serve as. For this reason, he didn't even want to give the forest boa king the opportunity to go away and could only use himself as bait for that, for the sake of inflicting the fatal blow. The frantic struggle of the forest boa king lasted for more than a quarter of an hour, but this prepared blow of Andromalius was just too powerful. For whichever magical beast, having one's brain pierced and devastated by darkness spiritual energy would hardly come with a chance of survival. With this severe injury, the massive vital force of the forest boa king was slipping out with no choice. Andromalius was actually not the slightest bit worried anymore. This time, his damage was just disastrous. For Medusas ended up killed, though, the reward was also massive. When thinking of his advancement to the 9th step, gaining him at least a place at the top 48 demon gods, his heart started to burn. Moreover, he still didn't know what treasure the forest boa king was defending. For the forest boa king to be so attached to it, it shouldn't be ordinary. Thinking about it, Andromalius' body started to convulse in excitement. Finally, the struggles of the forest boa king weakened, and even his internal pill fell into the swamps instead of getting swallowed back. His massive vital force was already close to non-existent. Andromalius relaxed his breath, an unbearable intense curiosity filling him. Seeing the internal pill devoid of the aura from the forest boa, he was unable to control the ecstasy filling him. Placing the internal pill in his hand and verifying that it had no trace left of the aura of the forest boa king, the devil snake Andromalius finally loosened his vigilance. After so long, he finally achieved his objective. His ecstasy from this was as one might well imagine. However, it was actually too soon for him to celebrate. The instant he let loose his guard, the forest boa king that seemed devoid of life suddenly moved. That head already soaked in blood suddenly flung to the side, fiercely aiming at the back of Andromalius. This video will end here. Thank you for watching.